Колеги, вітаю.
We continue our work. Now we'll speak about the visit to Ukraine, presidents of Belarus and Kazakhstan that took place recently, and also the law on non-block status of Ukraine. And I invite Valeriy Chaly, who is the deputy head of the administration of the president on international relations. Good afternoon. Let me start with the announced decision, very important decision as to the future model of security for Ukraine. I am forced to do that because of the emotional reaction of many representatives of Russian Federation, including Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, and there was a statement of the Deputy Defense Minister of Russian Federation. Thus, I would like to dwell on that issue. What has happened in Ukraine? In Ukraine, we corrected a bad decision that narrowed for our country maneuvers and a choice of the best model of national security. In 2010, I know, because I was running the group on preparation of foreign political part of the law on internal and external security policy, and I know proposals from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They were taken and then refused by Yanukovych and the advice of probably not only in Ukraine. That's why they included the phrase of non-block status of Ukraine, and that we cancelled all thinking about collective defense system. The decision about collective security system that was approved in 2002 under Kuchma president, and that was a grounded decision. It was based on those challenges and threats and opportunities of the state for the next decades. Then, in a quite voluntary way, it was replaced, it was changed, and now it's clear to make at present to Russian Federation. And as a result, it stopped reform of the in the armed forces and create a lot of problems for understanding how Ukraine would defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and independence. So I was involved, and now I'm involved to prepare this draft law. I'm thankful to MPs that they voted with the constitutional majority, 303. It speaks about the political support of the country, and because it's clearly our people changed, and more than half support this approach. I think it's quite a consolidated, clear decision. That decision is taken by the country, and that's its sovereign right. Nobody can influence on it, on decisions of the parliament, president, and people of Ukraine. Let's come to the main issues. The main point in this basis or philosophy, the first position is we corrected that mistake, so we cancelled the no-block status, and which has not provided to us anything. It did not defend Ukraine. It's not something we need, and Ukraine was de facto of a non-block state, and the status gave it nothing good. History showed that that's worsened the situation. And the second point, what has changed recently? The different models of regional security, strategic partnership with the Russian Federation in our laws. Now the situation has changed seriously. First of all, if yesterday we had different alternatives and different models to provide our security, now it's clear for everyone that the model is clear and one and only one. After Ukraine ratified the agreement of association with the EU, After the President of Ukraine, the government and the parliament clearly decided on the strategy and integration to EU, today it's clear that in addition to economic and political association integration, there must be security umbrella and defense and protection, and it's clear the only such tool in Europe that provides the security that is in NATO. And many countries of EU are members of that organization, and the only possible model of collective defense and security that is NATO. And we don't speak about other integration, security integration with Russia as a nuclear state or organization of the Treaty of Collective Defense and the conditions of Crimea annexation and in the East. We don't discuss it even. And our partners are the strategic partnership. It's not only about goals partners have achieved together, but also it's about clear commitments they have to comply with and values. All that was important, and we saw that those elements were missing, and their position was destroyed. So that's why, on one hand, we re-establish justice and we correct mistakes, but also we clearly identify our landmarks for the future that allows her to develop additional documents and amendments to the legislation. Is about that the government and the president will develop additional documents that will, in real politics, will become concrete as a two main goal.
Another moment that I would like to emphasize, really, the laws do not contain a clear-cut position about application to join NATO even already tomorrow. It is about more fundamental things, about the reform of the sector of security, about defense reform, about the standards and criteria that are highest in the world that Ukraine wants to meet. And at the moment, the highest standards are observed by the NATO countries, and they aim to be prepared for these criteria is the aim that we should achieve. There are countries that can solve the issue of joining NATO within a week. For instance, Sweden, that has all the criteria and only their political decision can take them there. But we are oriented on actions and results, not just statements. And our yardstick is very clear-cut. This is meeting the standards that we in the future may use to join the NATO. But this is, and I emphasize again, not about tomorrow. We have to conduct reforms, we have to achieve those criteria, and then we will arrive at a political decision. As of today, this decision can only be achieved as a result of a referendum. By the way, there was a resolution of the parliament that was about the joining NATO, but not the Treaty on Collective Security. This resolution is still in action, and in order to strengthen it, we need a referendum. So the future will show how these decisions will be reached. So I want to emphasize once again that any emotion, especially like those that we hear from Russia and threats that we hear, you know, the statements about that this can influence something destructively, let's not hear them from those who annexed Crimea. Destructive influence is when they send mercenaries and armaments across the Ukrainian border. They should not talk about the changes in the policy of a sovereign country that this country adopts itself. Another point that I would like to emphasize is that it is clear that the European integration and the implementation of the association agreement and the reform in the sector of security are two very important parallel ways that we have to go along in the nearest future. Today we have the sitting of the National Council for Reforms under the chairmanship of the President, and they will consider reforms in the security sector and defense sector, and you will hear about the results from my colleagues after this session is completed. And another urgent information, I have just talked to representatives who flew to Minsk. They are prepared and they plan to start the trilateral commission's session at around 4 p.m. It's been protracted, delayed for quite a long time, and it does require an urgent session. Ukraine is represented by Leonid Kuchma there, and OSCE is represented by Khalid Telovini. Mikhail Zurabov represents Russia. You know the issues. I remind you, it is very important for us to solve the issue of the exchange and release of hostages and prisoners, also the issue of adhering to the regime of ceasefire, and also the delineation issue. The coordinates are clearly designated in the Minsk Memorandum. Ukraine will stick to it, and I think it is a positive moment that Minsk Agreement now is a clear-cut yardstick for the Western world, and as far as I understand, even in Moscow they emphasize this, where the presidents of Kazakhstan and Belarus were after their visits to Kiev. It is very necessary today to see real steps in the implementation of the peace plan and Minsk agreements. It is impossible to delay for any longer, because it is understood that today even the economic aspect, those who try to establish the new order with their weapons are now at a loss, and they cannot put the territory into order. So it is clear that there is an issue of the threat of humanitarian disaster, the issue of humanitarian convoys and cargoes going there. They are still blocking this. So we have much to talk about in Minsk, and I think that after this session we will have to come to a more serious political format and reach the final result. As far as the recent visits by the presidents of Belarus and Kazakhstan are concerned, I think that this was a rather good place and the time, Kiev before Moscow, on the eve of Moscow, and the results that concern bilateral relations. I read a lot in mass media about the aims of these visits, but now I can tell you that this was the initiative of the Ukrainian side to meet our partners on those dates and in such a format. They really confirmed their support for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The situation has changed. The voices of Belarus and Kazakhstan is clearer now, and we concentrated on international relations and bilateral cooperation. And even now, although short time has passed since the visits, we are implemented quickly at a great rate our cooperation in military sphere, and we are working actively on the entire aspect of economic and energy cooperation. And the President of Ukraine instructed to prepare the decisions that concern these issues. So I think that this is the result that we were expecting, and the idea was very productive. As far as the nearest future and prospects are concerned, it is evident that Ukrainian diplomats and military and the Ukrainian people, and of course I wish them Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, but we are working very actively, and we have very intensive diplomatic work planned and negotiations of the President of Ukraine for the entire New Year's season, and it is evident that those who are responsible for foreign policy and security will work in order to secure the positions of Ukraine. So this week is rather intense, and the results of Minsk, and probably we will need another meeting there on Friday. These results have to bring first fruits next week. Especially we are expecting quick results as far as the release of our people and hostages are concerned, because this principle was clearly designated by all the parties, and to delay any more is absolutely inadmissible. Thank you for attention. Any questions, please?
With America, the year is expiring. It's a time to draw a line, and that this year was rich with tragic events, and it showed real friends and real enemies, and what guarantees deserve on paper. I speak about Budapest Memorandum. Your assessment: does the United States do enough according to that memorandum or not? How could you summarize Ukrainian-American relations during this year? It's clear that this year probably was the most difficult in the history of Ukraine in the new period of independence. And it showed priorities in national building in the country for their common future. Security, that includes security development, economic development, reforms, and real change of the country. As to threats, an extension of Crimea and aggression, we're facing, we are thankful, and probably would not be able to achieve these results if we didn't have the united position between Europe and the US, and clear voice in the world, from Canada to Japan, from Australia to neutral countries, and even CIS countries. They change their position, they change in their position, and they support Ukraine. And the position of the US is very important for us, and there were a lot of discussions about the act to support freedom, and the president of the US signed, and that act it opens new opportunities for supplying weapons, support of Ukraine, sanctions against the enemy, about additional opportunities for defense, and we have that, and thankful for that. And there is a real cooperation in that field, but the most important is the position of the US to support unity and solidarity of Ukraine with the other world, with the EU. That's valuable, and that the US was supporting that position from the very beginning until now. That's the most important for us, and if we succeed to understand and enhance our cooperation, and activities are coordinated not only with the US but also with the rest of the world. And the president of Ukraine during the last half a year spent more than 200 phone negotiations, and more than 180 meetings, direct meetings, personal meetings, and I don't know, with more than 10 conversations with meetings and negotiations with the vice president of the with the president. Those were forms of cooperation that allow Ukraine to hold a position of defending the country in the international sense, politically. So we have very intensive cooperation. We're happy with that interaction. What happens in the future, we will welcome that. Union, thank you, Vitaly. You spoke about the necessity of reforms to achieve great criteria for NATO membership. Here's the question: is Ukraine planning to apply for action plan for membership, just to have the plan to develop those criteria? So inform us. Yesterday, Minister of Affairs Klimkin, he told they work on to develop an annual plan. And about the referendum, is it better to have that referendum? We have the criteria or do in the process when we run reforms? I'll start with the last question. It's clear that, first of all, reforms, actions, and then political decisions. That's about membership or not membership in international organizations in different countries, and Ukraine will not be an exception. A political decision about a model, that's what we can work on. But as to membership, concrete decision on membership, that will be after that. How that will be done, then probably legislation on Ukraine will show to us. My position is, as always, for many years I told that the issue of security, that depends on responsibility of politicians, parliament, government, and the president. But if there is a need, and that if that is a sensible issue, we will need to have a clear position of people of Ukraine. That's how we see it. But I remember the situation in Poland, for example, when the issue of assessment of the support disappeared because all the country was focused. They decided to choose European model of integration and NATO system of security. As to tools, it's important not to have documents, but to have real reforms in the security sector. Even now, I see that base of bilateral relations with NATO and those changes at the request of the president and the government after the summit in Wales, those issues that we solved that allow us, we are correct, to develop our national program and to act accordingly, and also to understand how we can cooperate and how we can get assistance from NATO. There are trust funds, and they expand them, and NATO countries invest more and more money to support through those trust funds, and we have programs of cooperation, and we had them before. That's why when they react so sharply at now, I don't understand what happened, because the Ukraine works under the regime of cooperation started to do that before 2010, since 2002. So we speak about enhanced cooperation with NATO in the context of improvement of the capacity of Ukrainian armed forces and security sector. And it's not only about military issues, it's also about anti-corruption in security sector, coordination, improvement of communication capability and cooperation, interaction. We cooperate not only with the NATO as an organization. Recently in Poland, the president of Ukraine visited Lublin, and that's where there will be Ukrainian, Polish, Lithuanian brigade. So we cooperate military with NATO countries. We have technical military cooperation, but compliance and better criteria, so that is achieving interoperability. That's very important for us. If we need additional documents, well, that the government will develop them, and they will bring that to the parliament. In media, there was information that companies that were going to mine gas in Ukraine, untraditional gas, and that they're leaving from the country. Do you have any official information about that? Maybe on the heads of the states, and there are some contacts to keep those companies in Ukraine. I will not comment on that, because my comment when I told you there are different statements, variants that is used, and you continue to dwell on that. So there are two parties here. One, Ukraine, who provides those conditions, and also business that is ready to work on that. There were a lot of statements from international companies, and they wanted they told that they are ready to work in Ukraine. They will mine gas, and that's a result which you can get through media. I believe that that's energy segment adds additional opportunities for diversification in Ukraine, but everything depends on conditions and decisions. So it's not an issue for the president, but for the government.
Nikolai Shitko, the American Wall Street Journal. When do you expect the next packages of macro-financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund? We heard some statements these days about the beginning of the next year, but is there any specifics? Are there any specifics when the next IMF mission will come? First of all, I think that the political decision is at the moment about the help of international financial institutions and IMF and the European Union and individual countries, and the issue now is about the volume and time of this assistance. We are in constant negotiations and coordination, and the President and the Cabinet of Ministers are looking after this issue. Also about the third package of assistance from the European Union and the tranche from the IMF, but also support from the USA. And there were already statements about loan guarantees and clear-cut statements from Canada, Australia, and other countries like Japan, who will join in, and also the World Bank. And this package has to be sufficient not only to stabilize the situation, but also to provide for the opportunity of reforms. I will not tell you any specific terms, but we do expect that the specialists and the mission of the IMF will start their work in Ukraine even before our Christmas holidays. And we think that all the decisions about the macro-financial help will be reached before the January 20. Yes, we do have some time, but it's not a long time. The more so that at the moment when we expect the passing of the budget, those yardsticks are very important in order to see how Ukraine will live in the nearest future. And to continue about the conference with investors that EU is talking about, is there any preparation going on in Kiev? Do you have any clear understanding about what sort of conference this would be? At the moment, this conference is mostly oriented on donor support, but I don't rule out that there may be an investment component in this. We are talking about the first 3 months of the next year because it has to be prepared in a proper way, and there are several components to it. The first component is about reforms and investment, and the second component is about donor assistance to the restoring of the infrastructure in Donbass. And we are now working along those lines, and I think there's an understanding of a political nature But the government has to undertake some specific steps in order to accelerate the preparation for such an important event, because there is an issue of communicating with donors and investors. There are some organizational issues. I think there was a pause. However, this pause should have come to a close because we have the new government appointed, and I think there should be acceleration in this sphere because the president of Ukraine has got political support from several countries, and the government shall realize the conference, the aim of which is getting additional support for Ukraine. But I'd like to stress here that the macro-financial help and this conference are different issues. They are connected, but still they are different. When you mentioned 4 p.m. as the probable start of negotiations in Minsk, did you mean Kiev time? You know, I can't tell you whether this is going to be 4 p.m. or 4:15. I don't think this is very important when exactly the process will start, the conversation will start. What is more important is that they talk about some concrete agreements. I think that we should not expect concrete results today. I think that the work will start today, and by the end of Friday we will have some specific results. There can, this can be done in 2 trips there, but also the delegations may stay there. But I think that at last we have provided for the sessions of this group at least. About the higher format after Minsk, what did you mean when you talked about a higher format? I mean that a trilateral group is engaged in urgent tactical issues, and I named them, but there are political issues as well, and I don't rule out that there may be discussions, continuation of discussions in the Normandy format with the participation of the Chancellor of Germany and President of France. But I'd like to emphasize, at the moment, we are talking about many formats, and there's a discussion about them. But the main thing here is not to lose the continuity, because the Chancellor of Germany does play a very important negotiatory role, and here we see mostly the issue of the mechanism of negotiations, not the participation of any particular country. We would like to invite as negotiators the EU or the USA and the USA, but at this stage I think all the parties understand that they should use the mechanisms that produce a result today. In principle, the model that I talked about, the model for the future, may be modified, and if we reach a result that guarantees all these achievements, then I think there may be a broad format, and the broadest format is the UN, where they gave 100 votes against the annexation of Crimea, and you see that the USA and Canada and the European Union are holding to their position of about sanctions. This is a solidary position, a unified position, and one of the tasks of our diplomacy today is to preserve the focus of attention on Ukraine and on the support that would allow, based on Minsk agreements, to reach the results that have been already signed and agreed. Again, I emphasize, whatever the format, we still have only one option, the Minsk one, which gives us the signature of Russia and responsibility of the Russian Federation. That's why we're working in it, but any format that helps de-escalation, we would only welcome it. But I still want to emphasize that we do not want that different formats lead to the delay in negotiations. We are now at the stage when we have to reach results very soon. Thank you for your attention. All the best.